I'm going to check back in. Can everyone hear me okay? Give me one of these if you can't hear me. Okay, we're good. We got some thumbs up over. Thank you. Lots of good thumbs up there on Zoom land. So some of you might be grateful that I ended that a few minutes early, get a little break for the meditation, and others are like, what happened there? I want to spend a few moments to just kind of address that lots of us got some news last night or this morning that might have either been pleasant and pleasing, and for others might have been not pleasant or unpleasing. We want to remember in this practice that nothing is permanent. We learn that nothing's permanent. It's part of the three characteristics of existence: impermanence, dukkha, or suffering or dissatisfaction, is inherent in life. It's not that all life is dissatisfaction. Some things are dissatisfying, and we want to work with those. And then non-identification with self or ego. So we're also called to recognize that at times we have desires that we're clinging and grasping to that is actually bringing us some suffering, okay? Or we may have aversion to what is, and we want it to be different from what it is. But that fight with what is also suffering or dissatisfaction. And it's hard on us. It's hard for us to be at our best when in that circumstance. In this practice, we can follow the Eightfold Path to help us reduce some of this clinging and need for something to be different, and recognize where our locus of control is. Locus, not locust. Locus of control. And that would be with our opportunity to recognize, are we coming from a place of goodwill? Are we trying to work with wholesomeness? To really recognize what is our reality, what is our view that or belief that we are holding. Do we have the right motivation and intention when we act? Are we putting good effort towards wholesomeness? And we have a choice that we can have ethical action in trying to have right speech, speech that is beneficial to ourselves and to others, one that's born of goodwill, non-harming, and an aim towards harmony, to speak the truth when it is timely, and to try to avoid any ill will. Same with our actions. We get a choice to make it beneficial for ourselves and others. So if this period of time is difficult for anyone, I invite you to consider those teachings and to see if you apply those, if you find those helpful in how you choose to move forward today, tomorrow, and the next day. Okay. So tonight is the third night in our series on the 5 remembrances. The Buddha has recommended to his followers that we recite these 5 topics every day to remind us of these truths. 1, I am of the nature to grow old. I cannot escape aging or growing old. 2, I am of the nature to have ill health. I cannot escape ill health. 3, I am of the nature to die. I cannot escape death. 4, all that is dear to me and everyone I love is subject to change. There is no way to escape being separated from them. 5, my actions are my only true belongings. I cannot escape the consequences of my actions. My actions are the ground upon which I stand. When I found out I was scheduled for the 3rd remembrance, immediately my mind went to the guided Satipatthana Sutta meditation by Bhikkhu Anālya. So this is of the 4 foundations of mindfulness, and under mindfulness of the body, there is a cemetery corpse contemplation. Now, this is not likely to be funny to many, but I laugh every time I hear of this or think it, okay? So in this meditation, Bhikkhu Analayu, who's a Theravadan Buddhist scholar, methodically guides us through this contemplation, and in his very unique accent, when you're nice and peaceful, he goes, "You are going to die." Okay. And he emphatically warns at the end, don't cling to anything. Okay? It's a great meditation. It's about 40 minutes long, but hopefully that entices you to want to check it out. The 5 remembrances are a teaching on impermanence and dukkha and non-self, like we were talking about earlier. Gil Fronsdale wrote, "The goal in dying is to try to die with as much awareness as possible and in a wholesome state of mind." People who meditate regularly tend to have less fear of death and less fear of death and more equanimity and balance around death and in the face of death. It's because we remain more balanced and less reactive in the mind than if we didn't have the stabilizing force of our practice. I am a human. I am of the nature to die. I cannot escape death. You are human. You are of the nature to die. Those we love, we will be separated from. How interesting is it that we all know that death is imminent and universal, but not me, and not today. Can we know when death is near? Can we stay present in those moments? Death contemplation is highly recommended in the Buddhist practice. So this next part that I'm going to go over, the next couple of parts, might seem a little gruesome to some, and if it's difficult, just put your fingers in your ears, okay? Not going to listen. And I believe that may be due to our aversion in our belief system that death means pain, that it is bad, and is to be avoided at all costs. And there's some truth to that, right? One of our main biological goals is to assure a succeeding generation. So we don't want to die before we do that. And perhaps even stay alive long enough to become a grandparent so we might help to aid in the success of our species. And sometimes there is pain with death. And since we don't know exactly what dying feels like or what happens afterwards, this uncertainty can be quite off-putting. Through meditation practice, we gain awareness of the inevitability of death. Bhikkhu Analayu tells us that the stages of decay of the dead body vividly depicts the truth of whatever one clings to as the embodiment of I and mine for only a limited time. The Buddha particularly recommended attention and awareness on our eating and on our breathing, bringing to mind the fact that the next mouthful that we are to eat or the next breath we are to inhale is not certain to take place. There's a book called Living in the Light of Death, and it's by Larry Rosenberg. He offers a death awareness practice to go through, reflecting that everyone must die, reflecting that our lifespan is continuously decreasing. If that doesn't make you more aware of the moment, I don't know what would. Reflecting that the time for developing our minds is small. Reflecting that human life expectancy is uncertain. Reflecting there are many causes of death. That the human body is so fragile. Reflecting that our possessions and our enjoyments cannot help. Reflecting that our loved ones cannot help stop the process, and reflecting that our own body cannot help. In the Satipatthana Sutta, they talk about the charnel ground meditations. So originally this was intended that you would watch a corpse, decay, okay? So we don't get to do that quite as much here, okay? You can watch an animal that perhaps has been hit in the road if you would like to, okay? But perhaps you can, in your mind's eye, to just recall some of these truths as you work through in your own mind how this might be. One, I see my body dead for a few days, bloated, blue, and festering. I see my body dead, infested with worms and fleas. I see that all that is left of my body is a skeleton with some flesh and blood still clinging to it. I further consider my skeletal corpse without any flesh, still spotted with blood, held together by tendons. Then all that is left of my dead body is a skeleton with no blood stains, held together by tendons. I haven't lost anybody yet here. This is good. I see now that I have a collection of scattered bones that have come apart in different directions. They are just bare bones. All that is left is a collection of bleached bones. A year passes and I see that my dead body is reduced to being a pile of old bones. These bones decay, become dust, blow apart, and are scattered by the wind. They cannot even be called bones anymore. Well, how's everyone feeling right now? Okay. Are we upbeat? Dying with anticipation to know what more good is to come here? Okay. I have found this practice to be helpful, and I'm tremendously grateful for the preparation. I am aware that most everyone here tonight has been touched in some fashion by death. So I'm going to share my example here, and I know it's only one. But here's the reality I directly observed. 5 weeks ago, on October 6th, my sister called. My mother, in her 11th year of Alzheimer's, was in bed and had barely moved all day. Though over the prior week or two, she had difficulty getting up out of chairs, today she couldn't even roll in bed. She winced in pain as we moved to change her. She was frightened, unbelievably frightened. We tried to roll her on her back, and we were not clear whether it was dizziness or pain that was causing this frightening fear, or just fear of falling. But I was completely blocking her with my body. But it was scary to her. Was this a UTI, a urinary tract infection? Was it vertigo, not wanting to roll to the right? Or was the progression of dementia? After much ado getting her changed and settled, my father then spoon-fed her chicken broth and Boost. I have never thought of him as a patient man, but he was incredibly patient and loving with her. He fully understood the benefits of his service. October 7th, my sister informs me that hospice wants Mom to be turned every 2 hours to prevent pressure sores, and they have sent more supplies. They are so responsive. They've been incredibly wonderful. And it's obvious now she's in her dying process, stage 7 of Alzheimer's. She's eating a little bit of pudding, which is how we deliver her medications. She's drinking about a half Boost per day and taking a little bit of water. The hospice nurse helps to remove the bowels that have not moved in 6 days. Later, my father lies down in the bed with her and just holds her hand. It's been 53 years of marriage. October 8th. Now is the beginning of the 3rd straight day of her not getting out of bed, and she's sleeping so much more. She's barely eating or taking any water, and we find ourselves wanting to nourish her, but we also don't want to disturb what seems peaceful to her. We think it's best to let sleeping dogs lie. There are no rules in the end. The hospital bed has arrived. 911 lift assist has moved her to the living room. What a terrific service. Hospice informs it's okay to not push the foods or the fluids. My father, thanks goodness, is using his new hearing aid, so he's able to hear all that hospice is telling him to understand this process. He is grateful to be able to hear. October 9th, my brothers start making their way down from New Jersey. It is time for the family to be together. My sister reported the hospice nurse was not able to arouse my mom, even with a sternal rub. Yet mom is still warm, and her vitals are remarkably good. How long is this going to go on for? Hospice and the Hospice Foundation of America website informs us of what to expect in this process of transitioning. Perhaps a loss of bladder control, or as you're getting closer toward death, there might be no bowel or bladder discharge. The body temperature can decrease in the hands and the feet, and the skin might get cool. But on the other hand, some people burn a temperature and get a fever, or are flushed or warm in the torso and in the face. Blood pressure and heart rate gradually decreases. The skin might get itchy, pressure wounds, and they look at mottled and blotched skin on the hands and the feet as it goes up the leg. It kind of is like a barometer of how close we're getting to the end. Pain may intensify. If this happens, you might see signs of grimacing, moaning, gritting of teeth, signs of demonstrations of discomfort. But hospice is great in providing medications to manage the pain. There are breathing changes typically. The breathing rate can fluctuate, perhaps rapid breathing and no periods of breathing at all. Coughing or noisy breath, may have heard it called a death rattle, okay? With increasingly shallow respirations, especially towards the final hours and days. This does not necessarily translate to pain and suffering. That's important for us to know that. And hospice can provide medications to manage these secretions. Rapid breaths followed by a period of no breathing, called apnea, usually indicates that death is close. Death is usually close when you can count 20 seconds or more between the breaths. October 10th, I took the afternoon off from work. Being with my family is where I needed to be. Mom was having some illusions and hallucinations, which is common as one approaches death. Perhaps it's a calling from the other side. As she reached up and talked with the visitors that we could not see, she wasn't frightened at all by this, and neither were we. Mom is more alert today, what they call terminal lucidity. She hadn't really been able to say 2 more words in a row in the last year, but suddenly was talking in sentences. She would laugh when she heard us laugh. So at one point, my brother is holding her hand. He's by her side at the hospital bed, and my sister's standing at the top of the hospital bed. And all of a sudden, she looks up and she goes, "Farewell, whoever you are." I mean, just burst out laughing. It was hysterical. That was a gift. October 11th, my brother Dan flies back home to get back to work. We take turns sitting quietly holding her hand. Hospice informs us it's really important that we let her know it is okay to leave us, and that we will be okay if she leaves us. And we would each to do it individually, and we did. That's non-clinging. Tearfully, I hold my mother's hand. My brother Brian comes and holds my hand. My sister Patty holds his hand, and she puts her left hand on my mother's head. A connected ring of life. Something I'll never forget. I've experienced a lot of death in my life. I'm older. It's going to happen, right? Many of us, if not all of us, have been touched by death. This was so much more emotional than I was expecting. I was so with her passing. It was bittersweet. It wasn't that it was an unpleasant experience. It was a pleasant expression of sadness and grief rooted in loss, meaning that something was important to us. It is being with the present moment and the immense gratitude for the honest, raw expression and experience of the celebration of life. That evening, my brother and sister came over to my house for a bit. We were discussing some of the funeral plans that my father was putting together for the wake and the funeral. We wanted to kind of get our ducks in a row. It was 9 p.m. My father calls. He says, "I believe your mom has died." We raced back to the house. It's my sister's house where my parents live. We enter. Mom was breathing loudly. He had taken out his hearing aids. So, I mean, the poor fellow with the scare, but it was funny. October 12th. She's sleeping much, much more and barely moving. She attempts to scratch the itches. We try to keep her as comfortable as possible. It's been a couple of days now that she's been reaching up, as if she's being invited somewhere. I'm not an expert in the realms of the Buddhist tradition. I don't know what happens after we die. Other than the consciousness, spirit, essence, soul is no longer associated with the body. This could be a topic for another night. October 13th was such a quiet day. Not the laughter from 2 days earlier. No one has slept well. Waiting. The silence is deafening. I tend to be a human doing, but I was not interested in doing even the most basic things this day. This was time for human being. I learned a huge lesson in my foibles. I dropped my phone and I hit a Pyrex dish that was sitting close to my mother's bed. And I jumped up nervously and apologizing, for my mother was very anxious for years with any loud noise. You'd always be startled yourself. But she didn't flinch. And I realized, it had been almost a week now, that her years of panic and anxiety and fear seemed to be gone. That's great. October 14th, Mom's breathing is more labored. Her diaphragm is working so very hard. My sister lovingly maintains her medication schedule to manage the pain, agitation, and secretions. I have difficulty falling asleep that night because after hours of sitting with my mom, with her labored breathing pattern, when I went to sleep, and some of you may do this, you try to follow your breathing pattern, I could only hear hers. My body wanted to mimic her pattern. October 15th, the diaphragm is less active. The neck accessory muscles are doing most of the breathing now. It looks exhausting to try to even live at this point. Her hand is cold. I could not detect any life in it. No hum, no buzz, none of that vibration that we all have. Yet we all still take turns holding her hand. And this is where it gets interesting. So I was reading this talk to my sister, and my sister says, "Well, Denise, the night before, I was holding Mom's hand, and all of a sudden, she got this real bolt of electricity from my mother's hand into her hand, and she had a heightened sense of alertness throughout her body and her nervous system, and was feeling and experiencing an all-encompassing bright light." My sister believes she died at that time, though her body continued to breathe. Gil Fronsdale wrote, he's a Dharma teacher, "We cannot always know the final moment of death has occurred. Sometimes it is assumed that death occurs when the breathing stops. However, there's a belief in the Theravada Buddhist tradition that the final death is when the breathing stops and the body has become cold. This means that the process of letting go might continue for a while after the breathing stops. Some people sense the consciousness or life force leaving the body, and this is recognized as the moment of death. Sometimes there can be a sense that that person's consciousness hangs and hovers in a little while in the room, even though the breath has stopped and the body is getting cold. October 16th at 2:26 a.m., my brother is holding my mother's hand. My sister briefly left the room to go get a book of prayers. She returns at 2:27 a.m. Brian tells her she hasn't breathed in a minute. And then she died peacefully, her last breath with my sister there, who was her main caregiver. She died beautifully and peacefully. And we are told that most everybody does. We were present for the dying journey. This is just one story of 150,000 people that died across the world that day and each day. The breath is our common denominator, as is our death. We are of the nature to die, we cannot escape death. 5 days later, October 21st, a little charnel direct experience. My sister and I went to the funeral home to do my mother's nails and hair. Though her body cold, her lips and chin blue, it was not frightening or upsetting at all for us. It was a peaceful experience. It was a peaceful place. It was an honor to do this for her. She would have hated if a hairstylist had boofed her up. Surprisingly, after 5 days into the journey of rigor mortem, she was still less stiff than my father, who's still alive. I'm reminded of a myofascial physical therapy course that I attended about 11 years ago, where we're taught that we hold in our bodies our experiences, particularly the traumas and the difficulties. One exercise was to bring to mind a loved one, and I thought of my brother who had died at least 20 years earlier. We were asked to cut the cord and let go. I refused to let him go. You cannot take him from me. I could not let go. And still, I yearn for a relationship with my biological mother who passed 50 years ago. So on October 22nd, as I approached my mother's casket, just before the closing, I was reminded of the line of mourners who were bending down to kiss my biological mother in her casket 50 years earlier. I was 9 years old, but I couldn't reach her. I was too short. And with the mind of a child, I thought if I could just kiss her, she would wake back up again. Now with my stepmom, my mom of 53 years, I was able to kiss her and did not wish for her to return. I knew her life was suffering. I kissed her with love and a desire for her rest and bliss, with an ability to let her go. This is a poem called Let Me Go by Christina Rossetti. When I come to the end of the road and the sun has set for me, I want no rights in a gloom-filled room. Why cry for a soul set free? Miss me a little, but not for long, and not with your head bowed low. Remember the love that we once shared. Miss me, but let me go. For this is a journey we all must take. We each must go alone. It is all part of the master plan, a step on the road to home. When you are lonely and sick at heart, go to the friends we know. Laugh at the things we used to do. Miss me, but let me go. There is a Theravadan funeral verse. All things are impermanent. They arise and pass away. Having arisen, they come to an end. Their coming to peace is bliss. I want to share my favorite poem. It's not necessarily Buddhist, but it does beckon us to present moment awareness. Do not stand at my grave and weep. I am not there. I do not sleep. I am the thousand winds that blow. I am the diamond's glint on snow. I am the sun on ripened grain. I am the gentle autumn rain. And when you awaken in the morning's hush, I am the swift uplifting rush of quiet birds in circle flight. I am the soft stars that shine at night. Do not stand at my grave and cry. I am not there. I did not die.